Well, good evening. Welcome to the regular planning commission meeting, Blanc, Township, April 4th, 2019. Please rise and join us in the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Planning commission members present this evening. Mr. Mansour, Ms. Coulter, Mr. Hassan Saab, Mr. Johnson, Mr. Brown, Mr. Gellings. Gosh, this is a rough day. Mr. Van Dersky, Mr. Horsha, Mr. Yancho, and our planner, Mr. Mark Lloyd. Thank you for your patience. Sorry about that. Getting started. All right. Next item on our agenda, this is approval of this evening's agenda. Do we have any changes?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion we approve the agenda as stated.
Okay, motion by Mr. Bandersky, support by Mr. Mansour. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. We got everybody here today. 9-0. Good to see everyone. Next item is approval of the meeting minutes of the regular meeting of March 7th, 2019. Mr. Secretary, any changes?
Mr. Chairman, I have reviewed the final draft of the meeting minutes and found everything to be in order. So I make a motion that we approve the meeting minutes for March 7th, 2019.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Bandersky, support by Mr. Horsha. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes 9-0. Next item on our agenda is an opportunity for public comment. This is for the public that would like to address the planning commission on anything other than what we would have regularly scheduled
Send it tomorrow.
public hearing. We do have a couple of public hearings this evening. One in regard to the Kroger fuel station, and another one in regard to the restaurant off of
Holly Road.
Holly Road. Thank you. So if you want to address the planning commission on anything other than those two items, now's the time. Otherwise, we'll get to those very shortly here. Anyone in the audience would like to address the planning commission? If not, we will close the public comments section, move on to correspondence.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
regarding correspondence,
Yes.
notice the thing that we got in our packet earlier today regarding the Michigan Planner magazine and talking about the invitation from Rural Engineering to get together for that seminar. And I think it's something that holds a lot of appeal for me, and I hope maybe a lot of my colleagues as well. So I plan on trying to attend that.
Okay.
I do as well, Mr. Chairman.
I know that the Michigan Planner magazine section on public engagement seemed to be a pretty interesting article.
Yeah, great timing too, with going after the national.
Hey, I don't believe we have any old business this evening. Brings us on to new business, which would, first item up is special land use and site plan review for the Kroger fuel station. Someone make a presentation?
Through the chair, if I may.
We'll need your name and address for the record, and then kind of give us an overview of what you're planning.
Oh, certainly. Matthew Pisco, 37704 Hillstack Drive, Farmington Hills, Michigan, representing the Kroger Company of Michigan. The project at 8308 South Saginaw Street. If I can, very brief introduction for the macro operations of Kroger nationally, around 1,000 fuel stations. They're a bona fide petroleum marketer from coast to coast. Very large risk-averse company, publicly traded, that is concerned about a very good design. They give us a latitude to come up with things that are best practices in all construction and the underground storage tank system. They're wonderful to work with. In a micro operation, this site specifically, it is, if you can imagine, the fuel station is a category of the existing grocery store, albeit it's a mile away.
Excuse me,
Yes.
Mr. Lloyd, would you want to put the picture showing the fuel station while he's talking about it?
You want the site plan? You got it.
You can go back to the original site.
Okay. The fuel station is a category of the existing grocery store. It's like the deli or the meat department. It's tethered to the grocery store, so it can't run independently. Essentially, the cash register and the kiosk, which is less than 200 square feet, is essentially a pay point like it is in a grocery store. It's manned by well-trained Kroger employees. So it really is just an extension of the Kroger grocery store. And that's the intention, to be a convenience service for our customers. There are incentives. If Kroger customers purchase for every $100, they get 10 cents off. That's a current promotion up to $1. But unlike Costco, it's not a private membership club, so we can sell to the public. But for the most part, most trips generated are not new trips, but are people that shop at the grocery store, accumulate points, God bless you, and then purchase their gas at the Kroger gas station. It's not a traditional convenience store, again, at 200 square feet. It has a transaction drawer at the front and a speaker box. You can go up and make a cash transaction. You're welcome to do that, or ask for small sundries on the inside, gum, things of that nature. But most transactions occur at the 7 fuel dispensers via credit card transaction. From a design perspective, the canopy's night sky, dark sky compliant, whatever your flavor is, so that we're cognizant that as we move across the country, we're in sensitive areas, and they designed that to a singular dark sky compliant design across the country. So for photosensitivity and night sky diffusion, it is compliant. This site, couple of interesting features. We're sensitive to our adjacent neighbors as far as light diffusion, traffic. This is mimicking the store hours right now, which are 6 a.m. to 1 in the morning. Our site that we're redeveloping, we're going to raise the scenic in, and the site as it lays now is between 5 and 8 feet lower than the homes adjacent to us. So when we started design, we're already in a bowl, so that vehicular traffic that is circulating through the site is not going to cause light diffusion off of our site towards the adjacent neighbors. So that was a natural feature that we would have designed around anyhow to mitigate that. So that natural feature helped us stop that light diffusion from the site, from vehicular traffic. We had a conversation in pre-conference where we'd further like to mitigate that and put an earthen berm. We're going to have to balance some things on the site. We're going to put an earthen berm, if you can imagine. Can I walk over to the mic and talk loud enough to point? Because my laser pointer.
I can do it for you.
Okay, yeah, my laser pointer won't work on the
You can
TV.
take it out with you.
You can take it.
Coming in and around this area
Yeah, we'll put an earthen berm in some kind of serpentine shape,
to block all of that.
3-to-1 ratio, so the plants will survive on top, and that'll even further mitigate any, I mean, the possibility if a monster truck came in, that lights aren't gonna leave our site. The parking, that was one consideration in the review letter. The 20 parking spaces you see on the far left-hand side below the restaurant, that is a condition of the sale of the property. That is a continuous obligation that the sale of that property has to provide parking, 20 parking spaces for that business, whichever it may be. Those fall wholly on our property. For the fuel station, we have 4 parking spaces between the tank farm and the trash enclosure. 1 is accessible, and then 3 traditional parking spaces for an employee. 14 spaces are at the dispensers. They're not traditional spaces in an aisle configuration, but for the most part, that's where transactions take place. People park at the dispenser, run their credit card, dispense fuel, and get on their way. And I can go on and on about operational issues and things of that nature, but I'm at your disposal if you have questions or if you need additional information, please let me know.
Planning Commission members have any questions for the applicant? Give her- No? We did have a site plan review meeting prior to this meeting. And wanted to point out a few things. We asked for some additional information on the site lighting poles, and to indicate those locations on the site plan. The site lighting plan, photometrics that was provided, was hard to pick up some of the information. Details there. We talked about the berm at the rear. The other requirements is to obtain special land use, obviously, from this body. We had a total of 7 items. Most of them are formalities to obtain the agency approvals, that kind of thing. So,
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'm sorry, are you already finished?
Yep.
One of the things that I was pleased to see is that the applicant has worked with the Genesee County Road Commission regarding ingress and egress from South Saginaw Street. So I'd like to have the petitioner tell us about that, if you would, please.
Most certainly. It's been entering on 2 years now. Essentially, we want to flatten out all the myriad right-in and right-outs and close the gap between our two proposed approaches so that it'll be an additional lane in traffic traversing the front of the property, and that'll give us the ability to restripe to the intersection and get a left-hand turn lane all the way through to our approach adjacent to the restaurant. So we'll have stacking in front of our property via left-hand turn lane versus people stopping in a traditional traffic lane. So that has been vetted. I'd say we're probably 95% there. We had a final review meeting. It was early, last week, end of last week. So we've moved quite a bit along in there to mitigate. So essentially the road will widen in front of our entirety of our property plus 300 feet back towards the doctor's office, so that we're picking up quite a bit of singular lane dedicated across there and a left-hand turn lane.
So if I'm a Kroger customer and I've done my shopping at Kroger's,
Yes.
I want to come down and fill my car up, as I'm heading from the north to the south, tell us about the deceleration lane and getting into the station itself, please.
It'll be a traditional traffic lane. There is no, we are eliminating all the decel lanes that come in and out across all of those frontages. It's just gonna be a straight lane, straight through 2 lanes without interruption.
Thank you.
I might be able to help with that a little bit, and I know you might not be able to pick it up great on these, but if you look at the drawings, you can see that, you know, we have 5 lanes when we get to the intersection. And what they're going to do is widen it along here and allow them to build a 5th lane back here further so that they can go left and right out of the building, which means they've got to bring this slow lane or decel lane over here back a few hundred feet off their property in order to provide for adequate deceleration, and then enough width in the roadway right away to add that 5th lane out there.
And yeah, thankfully, and it's all on our side of the road. So we're controlling all the profiles and the improvements.
You mentioned a traffic light?
No.
Just
Up to the traffic light.
Oh, up to
That's
the
where the
traffic-
restriping will occur. No traffic. You saw my glasses fall off.
Yeah.
You
Chairman
talked
Gallagher?
to McCandless up there.
Yeah.
Chairman Gelling, I have a couple questions. So that means that the road is going to be widened to the west, going to take up property to the west of South Saginaw. How much is that going to draw the road closer to the point of the El Potrero restaurant? Does anyone know? Director White, is that?
It's no further than this. If you can see there, it's essentially a paved shoulder now. We're just going to make that a traditional road profile.
Okay.
So we're not taking.
Already as close as it's going to get, and if you were to push that further, you'd see that by going further west, if you maintain that line, you'll pick up that extra right of way over here, but in front of the restaurant, that distance won't change at all.
And another question about the fuel tanks.
Yes.
Storage underneath, and access to those by a fuel truck. Can you describe that?
Yes, tankers drop on the passenger side. They'll come in the northwest approach. Yes, the one close to the restaurant. They'll traverse into the property. They'll park in front. That whole operation takes about 25 minutes.
So there's enough room for the truck to pull in, and
Yes.
then what? Continue to go out
Yes,
or back out?
and once he's completed the filling operation, can pull directly around the back of the station and out. We don't block any traffic. You have full circulation around that tank when it's present.
And can you talk about the construction of the underground tanks in terms of,
Most certainly.
permeation and that thing?
Tell me when you all need toothpicks, because this is a really great system. Double all fiberglass tanks with an annular space filled with brine, and the brine is monitored. So if there's an intake, the brine level goes up, we know we're leaking from the second vessel. If there's less brine, we know that we're leaking to the inner vessel. Either way, the submersible pumps won't pump the tanks. Nothing has breached in and out. Those vessels are secure, and fuel operations cease until we find out what happens. At every dispensing island, there's a submersible pump or a sump underneath there that contains, if there was ever any breach or a dispenser, that will contain liquid in the sump. They have discriminating sensors that can differentiate between water and VOCs. Two things that are modern inventions that are fantastic is we have V1 vapor recovery. So when the truck comes in and they drop product, one hose is for product, one hose is to extract vapor. As they dispense fuel, the vapor is extracted back into the truck. So that is a perfectly inert, senseless, and there's no olfactory senses that are affected during that. And then two things that are, the federal government mandated in 1998 that onboard vapor recovery, as you dispense fuel into your car actively extracts vapor back into the tank, so that vapor isn't escaping as long as you're not topping off the tank. So it's a closed system. As far as the industry, it's a Cadillac of the industry. Very proud to use it. And
so you're talking about it monitored, is that physically monitored or is that some kind of electronic, how does that work?
For ullage where the tanks are, it's perpetually electronically monitored.
Okay.
The one thing living in Michigan we'll all be sensitive to, and you'll appreciate, there's one last check. When you turn on a dispenser and there's that obnoxious 5 or 6 second time where the pump just won't dispense fuel, that's the system pressurizing the product line to your dispenser, recognizing that it is whole, and then it'll turn a submersible pump on to dispense fuel. So I mean, there's a last check even before you dispense fuel.
Thank you.
So the approval agency for that system,
Is through LARA, through the state of Michigan and the Bureau of Fire Department.
any other questions from planning commission members? What I'd like to do is go to the public. We'll open up the public hearing. I would suggest you take some notes.
Most certainly.
And then we'll give you an opportunity to respond to those at the end. So is there anyone here that would like to address the planning commission regarding this proposal at this time? That's maybe on my left, the second row. Can I have your name and address, please, sir?
Carl Terwilliger. The address is on Mackin Street, 5141, the duplex, in behind the, next to the Rite Aid store.
McCandless Road?
Yes, on Mechanish. We had only one question. I'd just like to make a statement first. I appreciate that the people that are doing this in the township and the Kroger are trying to minimize any problems that we would have from our duplex. The only question I had, and I just want to refer to those pine trees in the other picture, maple trees, I think, the large maple trees. Those are very nice to keep the light from coming through, except when the leaves are off the tree. So as long as they,
Was it this
as long as the berm is,
Picture there?
yes, you can see the maple back and
Yeah.
above the, that'll block any of the light coming through from the vehicles. The only thing is in the wintertime, those leaves won't be there. And if he has already spoken, there's gonna be a berm sufficient, and any of the pine trees that you can see there with the leaves still on them would be in that area, then we're extremely satisfied. Just like to let you know that. Thank you.
Thank you for your
Yeah,
comments.
do the,
Anyone else in that row that would like to speak? I guess we'll work back. Anyone else on the left, my left-hand side? Go ahead.
My name is John Lancaster, 5151 Candlewood Drive. I opposed the station. Coming up on Saginaw Street all looks great, but what's going to happen to McCandless? The township and Genesee County cannot keep up with, as bad as that road is, almost year-round. They kind of pass it up a little bit today, but that's part of my concern. But we have so many gas stations in the township in the Grand Blanc area. You go a mile south to Baldwin Road, you got a station. You go up into town, you got two more stations. We got two brand new stations on the east side of town. You come into town, you got two more stations. You go up the north end of town, you got two more gas stations. How many more stations do we need? I really don't think that we need another gas station. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Is there anyone else on my left that wanted to speak? Not anyone on the right? We will close the public hearing, bring it back up to the planning commission. I guess, Mr. Lloyd, from a zoning standpoint, is there anything you wanted to review from your report?
no, there's nothing to add. We went through it all at the site plan review, went through a couple of issues, as you mentioned, and the development proposals compliant with the ordinance.
Zoning of the current property.
GC, it's general commercial.
GC allows fuel stations via special land use.
For the special land use, yes.
Did you have a comment?
In our discussions in the site plan, we talked about traffic. The comment was made that there's, and you mentioned McCandless Road, that there should not be any additional traffic generated here on McCandless Road from this gas station, other than what normal traffic that exists.
Did the road commission ask for a study, a traffic study?
We provided a full impact traffic
Yeah.
impact study, and that's why they, after considerations, approved the type of approach.
I guess I neglected one thing, give you an opportunity to make any comments that you, based on comments you heard from the public, anything you wanted to address.
With all due respect, Mr. T, I didn't spell your last name, but I know your name is Carl. We have no problem planting evergreen trees on the berm, which will completely mitigate the opacity issue. So,
Johnson, do you have anything to say?
As far as the zoning stuff, if everything's in order there, sounds like the traffic study's been done. So I know nothing to add.
Anyone else, planning commission?
Well, if I may, Mr. Chairman, just to the audience, we were very mindful, along with the petitioner, regarding the lighting and making sure that it did not bleed over into your properties and cause you headaches, and we feel as a board, certainly the site plan review committee, that is going to be just fine and you shouldn't be concerned if you
I've always have a concern with lighting from canopies that are 15.5 feet tall. The one thing that I think does help us in this case is that the slope of the land goes down towards Saginaw Street. So if you look at the elevation of the first floor, let's say of the homes that are off of McCandless Road, even though the canopy is 15.5 feet to the bottom, you're about 10 feet above the floor. So
It'd be like a wall pack on a single-story building.
I guess, can you talk about the light fixtures themselves that are in the canopy as to how they're constructed, how the light is directed?
They are, yes, I can, through the chair, they are an LED fixture. The diode itself is actually perfectly flush with the canopy down, so there's no pinpoint below the deck. And the thing that I think is probably most important is the hours of operation. It isn't open 24 hours. When the station closes, when the grocery store closes, they go dark, other than security light around the kiosk building, which won't transmit that far. The site goes dark.
What's the elevation of the light fixture, the LED light, in relation to the edge of the canopy? Is that recessed up at all?
The lights themselves are flush with the canopy deck, but if you can imagine, next time you're bored getting gasoline, you'll look up at the gasoline canopy. There's a 3-inch drop around the entire perimeter of the canopy, essentially a rectangle where the gutters are internally contained. So those lights are 3 inches above the perimeter of the canopy you would see.
Mr. Chairman? Oh, I have a question about landscaping along the front of the site, along the roadway.
Yes.
Is that just shrubs, or are you proposing any trees along that?
If I propose trees, Mr. Sears will pull hair out of my head, only because there's that forced main that's very shallow. If we could plant trees, we would gladly have done it, but that main is actually on our property, and it's very shallow. So as far as they're perpetually maintaining that to keep it going, that was an area of concern. So
Okay.
Mr. Sears said, please, no trees, plant the shrubs, put the trees in the back to mitigate the light diffusion to the rest of the site.
Gotcha.
I think the landscape design along the frontage is, is appropriate for the area, but I think you might want to reconsider some of the choices of plant material. Boxwood in this area is very iffy as far as surviving the winter, and the same with the quince. So you might reconsider those plant choices so that you don't have to continuously replace those.
Through the chair, if I may, we're welcome. We want to meet the density requirements. We're not particularly, we're going to fully irrigate the site so that the plants are going to live. If you have a specific species, we're more than happy to accommodate that request.
Well, the other, Mr. Chairman.
Did I see Mr. Horschel
Yeah,
had something to say?
I'm curious, what are the operational hours?
0600 to 1 a.m. is the grocery store. And operationally, this will open a little later than the grocery store, because the till actually has to open in the grocery store, and it'll close before the grocery store does. It doesn't share exactly. There's a brief interval that this won't be open, and it'll close earlier.
Chairman?
Mr. Van Der
The other consideration for the shrubs in front will be salt from the road.
Yes.
That'll be heavily salted. So whatever species are there should be.
Salt tolerant. Yes.
Mr. Yancho, if I may then, Mr. Chairman, do you feel that that's appropriate then, given the salt issue with the species that you discussed?
The junipers that are proposed in the plan are
Hardy.
adequate, but I believe that they're landscape architect may want to delve deeper into our local
As
conditions
you were saying earlier.
and taking into account the salt as well as our extreme winters, winds that will likely affect boxwood and quince if they're planted in that area.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments from planning commission members? I think what we'll do is we'll entertain a motion regarding the special land use. I would just like to see any motion that may be made would take into consideration a couple of items. One, the screening that's been discussed at the rear of the property to screen the parking, the tank farm, that kind of area, as well as to take a closer look at the planting species, that plant material that are proposed right now, as Mr. Yancho has indicated.
And if I might, depending on the motion and the action, that'll be listed in the disposition letter that we send out to the applicant as well.
Care to make a motion?
Make a motion to approve the special land use with the contingencies of choice on species for both the bushes and the trees, as well as the berm in the back.
That should really be a condition to the approval of the site plan.
It is,
Rather than the
but
special land use.
I'm thinking that that would apply to this.
To the special land use as well?
Here's the way that I would propose this. It should apply and it can apply to the special land use because it's a mitigation measure to mitigate potential problems, and that's what a special land use does. So it's very appropriate to include it there as well.
And
A second.
your motion is, I just want to clarify for the record, is regard special land use number 19-002. All right, any further discussion regarding the motion to approve the special land use? If not, a vote is in order. We'll try first just a normal voice vote. All those in favor signal by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes 9-0. That takes us on to site plan. So site plan review committee has granted preliminary site plan approval. We did have the 7 conditions that were identified. You know, if the planning commission has any additional comments, we want to consider a final site plan this evening. Of course, it would be conditional on what's been identified on the preliminary site plan. And I guess, does anyone see any issues with taking that action? Would be in order regarding site plan review number 1048. Is there a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion to approve the site plan review for number 1048, subject to the conditions that were indicated in the special land use.
So your motion is for final site plan approval.
Final site plan approval.
For support for that motion?
I'll support that. Well, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll support that.
Mr. Johnson offers support for that motion. Any further discussion? Ms.
Just for
Cole?
the record, can you just summarize the conditions? I think that would be helpful.
Read through that very quickly.
Yeah.
We had 7 items. There was a township engineer review of the plans and some comments in a letter dated March 14th, 2019. So compliance with those conditions is one of the conditions for the preliminary site plan approval. We indicated that any signs that are shown are under a separate permit, are not granted as part of this review. Item 3, we wanted to see the site lighting poles shown on the site plan and not just on the site lighting photometric plan. They were very hard to pick up off of there. We would like to see some details for that to confirm that they do comply with the township ordinance. Item 4 is to comply with township department requirements. We typically get comments, which I believe we did, from the fire department, police department. So it's comply with those comments. Obtain the required agency approvals, including Genesee County Road Commission, Genesee County Drain Commission, Genesee County Water and Waste Services, just to name a few. And I know they've been in the process of obtaining those approvals. And item 6 was to add the screening berm at the southeast corner of the parking area to aid in screening of the employee parking, fuel tank area, etc. Evergreen trees on top of that. And then item 7 was to come to this board and obtain special land use approval.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other discussion regarding the motion for approval of the final site plan? If not, we'll vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes 9-0. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next item on our agenda is both a special land use and a final site plan review for Unbelievable Burgers. Is someone here to address the planning commission regarding this project?
Good evening, I'm David Walters, 5161 East Court Street, representing Halo Country LLC. 5161 is in Burton. We are the landlord, and we are subleasing the space to Freakin' Unbelievable Burgers, and a representative is here tonight, Mr. Tom Wissing, in the back row. As most of you know, this was originally a Halo Burger location for about 5 years. When we purchased the Halo Burger chain in 2016, this store was an underperforming location, even though, ironically, it's the newest physically store in the chain. It was poorly performing, and we closed it in early 2017. It remained closed for approximately 18 months, or has been closed for approximately 18 months. At the end of a year, as most of you know, the statute requires for a special land use, which is the subject of the discussion tonight. The drive-through is a special land use. By the fact that the property was vacant for over a year, we are required to reapply for that special land use designation for the drive-through. We are doing so, and if you have seen your staff report, they are recommending that the drive-through be reapproved. It was used efficiently and without problem for 5 years when it was operating as a Halo Burger, and we expect the new concept, which is more of a fast casual as opposed to a quick serve, which is what Halo Burger is. It will be more of a convenience than people coming up and stacking at peak hours. So I'm requesting tonight that you reapprove the special land use as recommended by your staff. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Lloyd, final site plan review is a condition of the special land use? Or
Yes.
how does that?
Yep, approval of the final.
That's why, nothing has really changed with the site, and there's
Not a thing.
no intention to change anything.
No, sir.
So from a site plan review committee, we can't say nothing's changing, or we don't really have any objection.
Right, it's an
from
existing property.
From a site plan review committee standpoint. So kick it out, but, any questions for the applicant?
Mr. Chairman, just interested in what's the difference between fast casual and fast, was it served?
Yeah,
I'm curious.
in sort of the nomenclature of the restaurant business, QSR, quick serve restaurants, would be the traditional fast food, if you will. the Wendy's, the McDonald's, the Burger Kings, the Halo Burgers. Fast casual is a relatively new designation for restaurants that are somewhere between the traditional, sit down, hour and a half, 2 hour dinner, a steakhouse type dinner, and something in between, driving up to a drive-through or taking the kids in and getting in and out in 20 minutes and spending 2 hours. And that they now designate as fast casual, and restaurants like Five Guys or Panera Bread are more considered fast casual as opposed to quick serve. I'm not sure the delineation's a distinct one, but that's what it is.
Mr. Bandersky, do you have a question?
Well, to that definition, we would expect to see more cars in the parking lot for a longer period of time at your location.
I would leave that to Mr. Wissing, who is the new operator, but I would say that is true. I mean, I think that statistically at a fast casual, people tend to stay longer than they do at a quick serve, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Question, what's going to be the capacity of fast casual?
The capacity won't change. Whatever the capacity is today, as established by the fire marshal, will remain the capacity for the restaurant. Today, we never got near to capacity when we were operating as Halo. I mean, if we were
building,
1/4
just
full,
different
it was
name
a surprise.
Name on the sign.
Mr. Chairman, could I just take a minute
Absolutely.
to explain why we're even doing this special land use? And I think it's important. The reason behind this is our ordinance indicates that special land use, if it's abandoned or vacated or otherwise not used for a period of 1 year or more, they need to go through the process, it goes away. And so that's the reason that this is here. The site plan, as you mentioned, didn't change, none of that did, but our ordinance says that. Now, the issue here is the special land use was exclusive to the drive-through, and the building was built with a drive-through, so it's, it's just a little, it's a step that we have to take in order to grant them the ability to use the drive-through. They could go in there and operate a restaurant right now today, but in order to use the restaurant, that's what they need to have, is a special land use, or excuse me, the drive-through. So, it's a technicality, and our ordinance requires it based on the fact that they've been out of business for more than 1 year.
Change the picture.
Any,
I had a quick question. And this is kind of a comparison between the two. So a Halo Burger or a typical fast food restaurant, what do you expect stacking on a peak hour? How many cars are going to be there?
At our busiest restaurants, most of you probably know the Belsey Road store. It's fairly right across the street from the Walmart. At peak, we might have 6 to 8 cars.
Okay. And then comparatively with something like fast casual, where presumably it might take a little longer.
It's more of a convenience, I think. And again, I don't want to presume to speak for Mr. Wissing, but my experience has been it's been a convenience, and yes, people.
So it's not that people are waiting
It's more
longer
of a pickup than
more.
people drive up and order off of an order board. It's more.
My concern was that because it takes longer, then more people are waiting, and now you're going to be stacking much longer. And I want to make sure that there's going to be enough capacity.
I'm not. Again, I think for the most cases, and even QSRs today are doing it more through the apps. People are pre-ordering, and you pick up your food, it's waiting for you when you get there. I think we're seeing more of that as we get more into internet-based ordering.
any other, Mr. Yancho?
Relative to the opposite end of the stacking situation, the QSRs, I've frequented a few of those in the past, and but I see that there's some stacking that goes on as people may wait for their food, and you'll be asked to pull into a different location or parking space.
Yes, most of the fast casuals, and a perfect example is Buffalo Wild Wings, which is just down the street, just to the west of this store, will have designated spaces, and the tenant may decide to do that where, if the food isn't ready, there are, say, 3 dedicated spaces, pickup only type thing, and rather than waiting and stacking and drive through, they can pull in there, park, maybe go in and have a soft drink, whatever they want to do.
I'd like personally to see some a commitment to some designated spaces so that they're appropriately located and not filled with
I'll
dine-in
I'll leave that to your new operator.
Hi, my name's Tom Wissing, and my wife and I are the proprietors for Freaking Unbelievable Burgers. And to answer your question,
Excuse me, sir, your address, please.
my home address,
Or whatever.
it's 10240 North Fenton Road, 48430.
Okay.
Okay. To answer your question about the drive-through and designated parking spaces, across the front, we plan to take the two parking spaces on the far right. There's the photo there, so.
I'll point over here, are these the ones you're talking about?
No, they're kind of hidden by the tree. There's two
Oh,
of them right there.
right here, yeah.
Yeah, straight ahead.
okay.
Yeah, and typically, I don't know if you're familiar with the Unbelievable Burgers that is on Corona Road, but they typically have about, during peak time, at the most 4 cars, one at the window, maybe one back placing the order, and then 2 more vehicles waiting for their food. So it's not a great deal of drive-through, but of course it always helps to have the drive-through. And they do about 1.2 million a year.
I have another question, if I may. I frequent the Grand Blanc Senior Center, not only because I'm a senior, but because my mother's more senior than I am. And but pulling out of that entrance, Pagel's Drive, onto Holly Road, that an exit from Pagel's Drive seems to get backed up quite a bit. I believe that there needs to be sufficient space for both an in lane and a right and left turn exit lane. And because I drove into this site today,
Okay.
and there doesn't seem to be sufficient space to have that type of traffic flow. Where that lane doesn't seem to be wide enough into your shared drive with the storage unit
Okay.
to have both an in drive and a left and right exit drive. Is there anything you can do about that?
I don't know. I've never even thought about it or considered it.
Lloyd, do we know what the width of that drive is now?
I could probably scale it and give you that information pretty quickly. Happy to do that if you'd like, but I know this much, it absolutely meets the requirements for turning radius, for driveway width, for two-way traffic. I mean, it's designed and developed in accordance with all of the required standards. I'm not sure what you're experiencing. I've been out there myself, been through there several times. As a matter of fact, I went back out there today myself, and I'm not sure what you're experiencing, but your point's a good point to make. I just don't see it. It does meet the code requirements for the development standards. And I haven't seen, and we talked to folks, problems of getting out onto the road or whatever. I just haven't experienced that.
Mr. Chairman, I think there's peak times there in Holly Road, as there are with many of the other roads in the community, and so depends, I guess, if you're there at noon, that probably, I would think, would be one of the busiest times on Holly Road. When I'm on Holly Road, it seems like all the time is busy. But I remember we spent a great deal of time on that when we were going through the process of the approval for Haleburger, the facility itself, and it met all of our requirements.
And just anecdotally, I mean, I spent a lot of time, obviously, as one of the owners, driving that drive at all times of the day when we were open, and didn't experience any issues to speak of other than what might be anticipated, during peak times on Holly Road. And as you know, this is well west of Saginaw Street, and a lot of the traffic turns off and goes, toward the high school or goes south on Saginaw Street.
Mr. Chairman.
Bandersky.
As a follow-up to that, Mark, maybe you could just check with the police department and see if there's any, from their standpoint, any problems that they've encountered, accident-wise or whatever, in that area.
I will, and I will point out for everyone this evening, we do that all automatically. The fire and police, all the departments have the opportunity to review. I don't mind that specific question, a very good point, but just for the record, I want everyone to know that they do review all of these projects as well.
Any other comments, questions from the planning commission before we go to the public? Have a seat.
Thank you.
We'll
Thank you.
see if we've got any comments from the public. Again, I guess we'll start on my left. Anyone in the second row that would like to address the planning commission? Yes, anyone on my left that would like to address the planning commission? Anyone on the right?
Mr. Chairman, for the benefit of the commission, I should bring to your attention the letter we did receive from the city of Grand Blanc, which they commented on a concern associated with the alignment of the drive aisle. And we did check that. We checked it from the original development, as I mentioned. We don't find a complication or problem associated with the design or the alignment of the drive aisle stacking, entering or exiting. But you know, there was a comment that came from the mayor of the city indicating that there was concern and maybe a suggestion of realigning things. But, you know, we've run this through our planning folks, our engineering folks from the beginning of the project. And again, we're just not seeing that same issue.
I guess if I'm understanding the comment correctly, they were looking for an exit out on the Holly Road directly from the...
I don't know if it's...
Sounds like it, they want to do curb cut and straight ahead.
I think we'd rather control the
Number
access
of curb cuts.
instead of providing another access and causing more conflicts, I would
Yeah.
think.
Well, Holly Road, we do have criteria for that. We do require separation of, I believe, at least 250 feet between driveways, so we wouldn't necessarily want to put it right there.
I think one thing I want to do before I forget is formally close the public hearing. Just thank you for your comments,
Sure
very good. Okay, so bring it back up to the planning commission. Any other comments based on what you've heard, seen, experienced? Again, I guess we'll go through and entertain a motion for special land use 19003. If anyone care to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman.
I'll make the motion that we approve special land use 19-003 for the Holly Road proposed drive-through Unbelievable Burgers.
Heard some discussion about potentially identifying some parking spaces for pickup, or I don't know if that's, I'm not suggesting one way or the other, if that's part of your motion or no.
I'm not sure it's necessary,
Okay.
but I would entertain
I thought Mr.
amendment.
Russing clarified that there were spaces
Okay, that they plan to
hidden by
use.
the trees on the picture.
I just didn't know whether someone wanted to identify. That's fine. It's not a part of your motion.
No.
Ms. Coulter's made a motion. Is there support for that motion?
Support.
Support by Mr. Bandersky. Any other discussion? Not, a vote is in order. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion passes 9-0. And we move on to the site plan review 1050 for final site plan approval.
Same process.
Anyone would like to make a motion regarding site plan review number 1050?
Okay, I'll make the motion. I move we approve site plan review number 1050, again, for the Unbelievable Burgers proposal on Holly Road.
That's for final site plan approval.
Final site plan approval.
All right, is there support for that motion?
Support.
Everybody supports. I think I heard Mr. Brown millisecond ahead of Mr. Horsham, so we got Motion by Ms. Coulter, support by Mr. Brown. Any other discussion?
Yeah, Chairman Gillings, what's the situation with the signage? Would that be a separate,
Separate, that's a good
issue.
point. Yes, that would be a separate approval process.
okay?
All right, if no other discussion, then a vote is in order. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion passes 9-0. We now move on to solar ordinance review.
All right.
Lloyd?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Again, I want to compliment and thank Commissioner Coulter for all of her work. And in this particular instance, I also like to thank Commissioner Mansur as well as Commissioner Yancho for some comments. And we sat down, went through these comments. Frankly, most of it is just answers. Some of the comments resulted in some changes, and what I did was I drafted a new version of the document, put it in front of everybody, and if you look through it, the changes that you'll see that are being proposed are only on the second page, and I'll get to that very quickly. So if you'd like, what I would do is I would like to just walk through the comments that we received and then identify how we address them or what the response might be. So as we go to page 2, if you look at the added language, it was suggested that we put some language in there very close to what we have. But instead of, we just wordsmith that a little bit. It was a good comment about maintaining the aesthetics of the community, and what we did is, you'll see, while ensuring the orderly development of the community. The point being, we are kind of limited on our ability to regulate aesthetics, so orderly development just seemed to fit, and I'm sure we can all get behind that. The next change in that same paragraph, what I did there was just combine the sentences simply because the way that the questions came out was to delete some comments that we had made about the dependence on imported sources of energy. Well, maybe that ship has sailed, and that might have been an older version that somebody put together a couple years ago. But what we ended up doing was just taking that language out and made a little bit longer sentence, but I think it reads well and it works just fine. Solar energy expands energy options and can help maintain a power supply during power outages in the electrical grid and create economic opportunities for region and locally based manufacturers and suppliers. If everybody agrees that that's a reasonable way to address those comments, then that's good. Now, moving down the page on item E, there was a question about, do we have building permit requirements specific for solar? And the answer is no, we don't. And are there any specific requirements with regards to glare or other things? No, but the industry manages that. There are some industry standards associated with that, but we don't have any provisions in our ordinance specifically for solar. What we do have are ordinances that identify things associated with nuisances of other issues of that nature, but the understanding and the learning that we've been able to do on this is that the glare associated with these is very minimal these days. They work very hard to make it absorb as much as they can as opposed to reflecting anything. So it's a pretty minimal issue, and the answer to that is no, not necessarily.
So Director Lloyd.
Please, sure.
Yep.
Do you know what these panels weigh?
Pardon me?
Do you know what a typical panel weighs?
I don't. They're going to be different weights.
Because the building department isn't going to have anything to do with the installation.
No, but they'll require documentation to show that the roof and the structure is all structurally sound and adequate to support the weight based on the code requirements. That'll all have to happen. Just like if you were mounting an air conditioner unit on your roof, you wouldn't be able to just go do it. You'd still need to show the building department that the manner in which you're affixing it meets the standards for the building industry. So that would be taken care of.
The idea is you can't just go out and do it, you need to.
Yeah, you need a permit, and based on getting that permit, there's certain standards you'll have to meet, which would be ensuring that the structure is adequate to hold it, and wind and other things are addressed. And the building code takes care of all of that.
Just, I don't know, related, but topic along these lines. We're starting to see more and more of these units on roofs of houses. And sometimes, not always, but some of the application really, to me, are detractive for from the appearance of the buildings themselves. just putting them on doesn't seem like a very reasonable approach to that. I could see where the whole effect of a neighborhood could be dramatically changed by a couple of these things put on in a less than thought out manner.
Well, we do have some pretty clear criteria in here in regards to the mounting, and if there's suggestions on that, or that.
I think your earlier comment that we can't really regulate aesthetics, and everybody's got a different opinion, and I appreciate what he's saying. I don't think they're the most attractive either. Like to vote against this ordinance? Do you have that,
No,
you have
I'm
that
just,
option?
we're having a conversation.
Yeah,
I'm just
sure.
wondering what people think about it, if anybody's thought about it, because personally, I've seen some that were extremely unattractive. I've seen some that blended right in with the roofs and were almost camouflaged right out, where you didn't notice unless you looked at them hard, but
Right.
thought I had.
Yeah, and the other thing, yeah, we do have some requirements here that they're, 3 feet back from the edge of the roofs and stuff. I knew that we had some certain criteria, and there's a certain amount that it can be above the roof line as well. So, there are limitations on those awkwardness potentialities. And of course, there's no way of regulating everything, to everyone's satisfaction, but the standards that I think we've come up with work. I do appreciate your concern about aesthetics and the way that might look and whether or not it could affect the neighborhood. I think those are all good points.
Chairman, to Mr. Lloyd. Yeah, so just to clarify here, it says a building permit is required for a building mounted solar energy collector. The application shall be, accompanied by a site permit.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody in the township wants to put a solar panel on their roof, they have to get a building permit for that, right?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Doesn't really address aesthetics too much.
Doesn't address aesthetics, but structurally,
Yeah,
you would,
correct.
that would kind of avoid the whole structure concern.
Chairman Gelli? Yep.
Mr. Manser.
Mr. Lloyd, so going back to the issue of the township building permits, is it, so we have a standard permit form we use now.
Yes.
Is there anything that we should contemplate adjusting that in order to kind of prompt questions around a solar ordinance? Or do you just leave it open enough to people feel something is necessary to put on there or not? Or should we have a checkbox of some kind?
Yeah, we had the discussion, and the manner in which and the way that we process and deal with building permits, it's pretty straightforward and standard, and there's nothing that came from discussions with the building folks that there was any need for that, or even any idea that there would be such a thing, a specific regulation for that. Now, we will have handouts and information available for folks, about solar and things, but as far as the building code and stuff, there are no specific regulations there that address it. So there's nothing specific from a building standpoint. And so let's see, I'll keep going through this one for a moment. Another question that came up was, the discussion in here about it's allowed in all of the solar on-site, which is a smaller version, solar system can be considered an accessory use in all zoning districts. There was a question about, what are all the districts, and we can walk through that. And then it talks about should there be different size installations in industrial and commercial, and as we go through there further, you'll see that we do in fact allow for the bigger, larger developments. The on-site is just not the same. Now, if somebody wanted to build a smaller on-site system, they could, but in the industrial and commercial districts, we do allow a little bit more flexibility with the size of what we're calling the commercial facilities, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Again, another question about the code came up with regards to wind ratings and stuff, and yes, the building code does have very specific wind ratings and requirements for tie downs and strapping and things, so that would be taken care of. Again, I think then moving down page 3 on item B7, there was a question about whether or not our permits do the same about solar, and it's the same kind of question. And can our existing permits accommodate solar? And yes, they can. And then the other question was this, and I worked real hard to try to get this information, I just haven't got it yet, and I apologize, but there was a question on number 4C about the minimum lot size was to be 20 acres for a commercial solar. You need a certain amount of size, and we basically just pulled that from some of the other industries. But, you know, the question here is how did we land on 20? The answer that I have to that is sort of the standard that was out there, and you need a certain size in order for it to be a commercial facility, because you're selling back to the grid when you get to that. Now, I am looking at how many properties we have in town, and I just don't have the information for you, so I'm sorry, but I've asked for the information, I just don't have it yet in regards to, well, how many 20-plus acre properties do we even have? And, you know, maybe to get some perspective on what we, you know, might see.
Just to clarify, I think the ordinance is addressing a commercial installation that will provide energy back to a utility, I guess, as compared to a commercial building that could have a solar installation, correct? I mean, you could have a Rite Aid, for example, that has a solar installation on it, is that correct?
Yes.
That doesn't have to be 20 acres.
Oh, no.
Just to clarify that.
No, that's right. Do you want to try to help explain that?
Right, yeah, there are two basic
Thank you.
categories. The on-site systems are ones where the primary purpose of generating, you know, the power is for use on site. And then what we're talking, the 20 acres applies to what they call commercial solar energy systems, where the primary purpose is to sell to the grid. They're sometimes called solar farms. So that's the distinction. And I mean, in practice, I think most of the solar farms out there, the ones that are basically built to, you know, sell power to the grid, tend to be actually much bigger. I mean, you know, hundreds of acres sometimes, because, you know, the whole purpose is to make enough money to, you know, selling it back to the grid.
And frankly, I'll say that, you know, to be very honest, a number of the other ordinances that we reviewed and looked at were similarly written, you know. So, you know, we didn't feel like we needed to go out and try to fine tune it. Thought that made sense, looked around and through our, you know, logic, we made that conclusion that, well, yeah, you need 20 acres in order for it to actually potentially be successful.
Sounds like Mr. Bandersky has a question or comment.
Yeah, given the discussion we just had, would it be worthwhile to add a few words to the ordinance clarifying what that 20 acres represents? You know, the fact that commercial, that's going to go back to, you know, rather than...
Well, it's in the section on requirements for commercial solar energy systems. And the definition.
It's in the definitions.
Yeah, and the definition of commercial solar energy system is primarily, primary purpose is to sell to the grid.
Will this allow the other side of the coin, the residential, the on-site, to also sell to the grid if they were to produce enough?
They can, I think Mark can.
Everybody
explain it
can,
a little bit
okay.
better.
If you
Yeah, you can
generate
sell the excess
more,
back to the
yeah.
grid, but there's a limit, I think, on how much credit
Right, you get
consumers
credits.
will give
Okay.
you.
But you're not restricted to, you can only sell if you're a commercial designate?
No.
Okay.
No, but what they do, these are good questions, and we might as well spend some time learning a little bit. What they do, the industry, what they do is you come to them and you say, hey, I'd like to put a solar system on my house, and they're gonna look at your use over the last year. And they're gonna use that to base the size of your unit on, you know, whatever you're gonna build. So in other words, they're making it so you really, they limit your ability to sell very much back to the grid. They're not really even letting you build a big system. It's limited to what you need. So they're not letting you build a system that's 5 times larger than what you might need. They're limiting it to what you use. And so the industry, I think, is just adapted to what might have been a little bit of a problem when they started saying, hey, yeah, we'll pay you money for putting things back on the grid. And they went, whoops. So I think they've just found their way, and regulations are still going to continue. This is still relatively new, so we may find, you know, some of our numbers change, and the effectiveness and efficiency of these panels is going to continue to improve, I'm sure. So we'll start to find things like, you know, more of the roof shingle types probably, and other things that are much less obtrusive and things. So, you know, we're just kind of scratching the surface, but we do believe that, you know, we should be looking at sustainability in Grand Blanc Township, and this is just one of the ways that we would be pursuing that. Any other questions on that?
So, Chairman, so Director Lloyd, again, going back to the 20 acres, I mean, this is probably spending too much time on this point because I don't know if there's going to be much of a demand, but it does seem to be kind of arbitrary, you know, designation here of 20 acres, maybe 10, maybe 30. I mean, I don't know. Just so the Planning Commission knows that that may come up again, and we may have to make some accommodation if someone says.
Well, I will, and I continue to work with folks in the industry to find more information, and I will dive into this a little bit more because there's another place in here where there's a standard about the square footage of drainage and runoff. That's just an industry standard. That's why there's the square footage. But I'll look at that, and we'll continue to look at this. It's important.
The other comment that I just wanted to make is, and I haven't studied this much, but just kind of thinking about it, sun energy, right, is now used to basically warm the earth below it. And by basically siphoning it off, using it to create, solar energy or, into the panels. I mean, we probably can't have enough solar panels to make a difference, but you could see where over time that if we had enough that might, might have some unexpected consequence.
Global warming, right?
I don't know.
Mr. Ganchik.
In regard to the 20 acres, an arbitrary measurement, as well as where the sun's energy ends up. Oftentimes, as a landscaper, we find that hard surfaces create heat islands. For instance, our cities are often considered heat islands. So those non-vegetative surfaces, whether they be pavement or rooftops, can adversely affect the temperatures. And I don't know that we have a comparable situation in the township right now, but let's just say, for instance, in the city, if the Grand Mall was in the township, and they decided that they wanted to have a commercial solar collection system that might add to their bottom line, but they don't have 20 acres, our ordinance would not allow them to put a rooftop system on their building to collect energy that would probably be in excess because they don't have a lot of machinery. They just are using lighting indoors. So then that facility would be contrary to our proposed ordinance.
Is this something that they could apply for a variance in that case?
I'm sure they could.
Absolutely.
I don't know.
It should be a dimensional variance, sure.
But I think we're, as far as an arbitrary number, that's where my objection would be to having this 20 acre. And I proposed to have it be a percentage of the site. So if, and I won't suggest a specific number, but if 40%, 20%, whatever of the site was covered by a building, then we would allow commercial use for solar.
I guess there's got to be a minimum size that starts to become where it's feasible to sell back.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah,
I think that's.
if you've looked at
right.
it.
And as I mentioned, I will check again more with the industry to pinpoint to get some specific answers. These are good questions,
Yeah,
and we
it's
just
good
don't
to
have all.
confirm that we're in the right ballpark.
Yeah.
And I think as Mr. Manser said, I'm not anticipating a lot of demand,
Yeah.
but we also want to have
Sure, sure.
good comment too.
There's a couple more items here on that. Let's see if I get to. Let me just flip over to page 6 because I think there's a couple of good questions there. The first one was, why are we requiring this guarantee? It's a financial guarantee for the removal. The reason is 125% is that's what we use across the board here for, let's say we allow somebody a temporary C of O on a building and their landscaping isn't quite done. We estimate the cost and then add another 25% to that to cover the administrative cost. So the 125 covers the cost of whatever the improvement might be, plus 25% extra to cover the administrative costs that we might cover. So that's the reason for that. Now, moving on to some other questions. I'll just walk through these as well. There was a comment about making sure that new installations conform to the fire codes, and that's required automatically, so we have that covered. That's in items 2D. If you look at it, we already have, every system needs to meet all of the code requirements. It's already taken care of in item 2D. Plus, all the fire codes need to be met. And then we have another one here. It talks about unless the front yard, we talk about the setbacks not being in the front yard. And there was a comment here about unless the front back is set back over 200 feet from the street. But we're saying no, if they want to do that, we at least, you know, as we're working on it, our thoughts were, no, if there's a need for something like that, they probably ought to come in for a variance. Something automatic to let them have something in the front yard could be problematic because we just don't know what the circumstances might be. So we would rather that there be a reason for it to be located in the front yard, like the backyard was too small or something, not just because they wanted to. So if there was room in the back, we'd rather that they put it out back instead of giving them the approval to do it in the front. So allowing it to be done in the front, if there's justification for it, would be one way, and that seems to make sense for us. So that's the way that we approached that. And let's see. We also talked about the minimum lot size again. We just went through that, so I don't want to have to revisit that. And then there's another comment about, and this is on page 5, item F. It says that, you know, if more than 4,000 feet is to be impervious, then they need a drainage plan. Well, the reason for that is in fact an industry standard. Our engineering standards say if it's 4,000 feet of impervious surface, you got to give us a drainage plan. So it applies to this as well. So that's the reason for that. And I think those were the only comments. And so I'm hopeful that we've been able to address most of them. I know that we're still going to do some work on the 20 acres and see what the reasoning behind that is. But you know, hopefully we were able to address the comments that we got from.
I think we've got a couple more, Mr. Mender.
Sure. Oh, yes, please.
Yes, not related to the wording,
Okay.
but for all future documents, can you please put a date on it and some initials as to who the author was? I've asked that question, that request in the past, but we should be dating these so we know what's the latest one.
That's a good point. And you did say that, and I apologize.
And it might include a revision number?
Date would
They
do that too. You're right.
And if anybody has any idea or would like to know what 20 acres looks like, come on over. I had 20 acres.
When you're ranking it, it gets a lot bigger. I think Mr. Johnson had a question.
I do. There's a solar facility located in Lapeer. That's roughly, 100, 200 acres.
Yeah.
It's huge. One of the things that I would consider looking at is, and we've stumbled into this by complete accident, the business that I'm in. They put so much energy into the ground that none of the analog phone systems or any of the underground utilities, with the exception of would function correctly because of the cycle of the energy that's coming back through all the lines. None of it worked.
So, excuse me. So, what do you mean by none of it works?
So-
is it an immediate area or is
So yeah, so outside we have a property that's located very close to the solar site, and we brought in AT&T phone lines, and then we also have a SIP line too that we use, but we use analog as backup. Not only was the DSL line not functional, or the T1 line not functional, but none of the analog phone lines worked either. There's too much noise on them, and that was all being picked up off from the
And how far away from the facility were you?
probably 300-400 yards.
Oh, interesting.
Well, that's good to know. That's another thing we'll have to look into.
So maybe that's another term in the ordinance, that there has to be some kind of testing to ensure that there's no interruption
Noise,
to
yeah.
noise to the surrounding properties or whatever. Huh, interesting.
Very interesting.
Go on.
Who would have known?
Good point, thank you. So, Mr. Chairman, if I could, this item is here being brought back to you again, and there's clearly some changes and some things that you want us to look at, and we're in no hurry, per se, to get on, but we would like to get started on the chicken ordinance. So, as soon as what we would like to do is be able to set a public hearing and introduce this before too long, and I don't mind waiting another meeting if you feel it needs to. If you feel that the kind of changes that we're going to go look at are minor enough that it wouldn't affect the basic ordinance, then what we'll do is plan on having this available in a public hearing for the next meeting.
I would think, in my own personal opinion, if you make the changes that we've talked about, including the last one we just heard about, and bring back the information on how many 20-acre parcels we have and that kind of thing, then we could set a public.
Okay. And then
date. Is
the issues of noise and interference, if you will.
Yeah, you get that written in there as well. So
Yeah.
we'll have a first reading for the public.
Okay. So you'd like to see it again, and that's great. Happy to send it back to you.
But not necessarily waiting for another meeting to say it,
Right, I
right?
agree.
You mean in between?
We could schedule it for a May.
Oh, if you're ready to go to May, then I'm ready. I'll get it out to you.
As long as you picked up.
You got it. Yeah, we'll see. Thank you.
Need a motion for that?
No, I don't need a motion for that.
Okay, we put it on the agenda for next May,
I did.
for this May. Done with the solar ordinance for today? I guess the next item on our agenda is master plan update. I see we have a letter.
Yep, Leah clearly isn't here. She's busy with other things tonight, but what I do want to say is, we have been looking at a number of things. We do have our steering committee in place, as it's indicated here. We're talking with the school already and working on some things there. They're very excited about being a part of this, I have to say. And there's a couple of things, and I meant to run another set of copies. What I do want to do is I want to send you a section of the Fenton Township master plan, where they did a pretty significant community involvement section, and they even utilized some of their survey results within the document. I hope you'll appreciate that. What I'd like to do is just get it out to you, as we're moving forward on this stuff. But you'll see how they formulated the community involvement part of this, and it's quite impressive. As we said, we're going to be beginning in May to start our steering committee meetings, and they'll start before the planning commission. We are going to need to work with the planning commission's the site plan review committee. We may need to tweak those days a little bit here or there. I'm not sure how that'll work. But we've got to try to fit things in, so it's just a little bit of a squeeze here and there. We'll all probably feel a little bit of pain as a result, but it'll be worth it. And then, as mentioned on here, the first thing that the steering committee is going to be doing is working on the community engagement. You'll see a full menu, if you will, of options, none the least of which are what I had mentioned Fenton has, and you'll see some of them in the recent article that you have for this evening, and I hope you take a minute to read that, because we really need your input and feedback on those kinds of things that you think are going to help. I know what has worked in the past, but your individual ideas and thoughts about who you want to talk to in neighborhoods and special smaller meetings and stuff, those become really some of the most important parts of this. So we will be picking your brain and working with the steering committee and getting with folks to get some of those things going. And then again, we are putting we being Leah and the folks at Beckett and Rader. But we did put together the survey information. They have that. They're compiling, the results of the comments that we got from the commission and others. So what we'll have is a good running start, if you will, on the surveys, I believe, and you'll be able to look at a series of other ones. So I think we're where we want to be on this. I wouldn't mind being a little further along, but having the steering committee in place and things now, this is when things will start to move. And as soon as we begin getting the community engagement going, And that'll only take a few months once we get it going. That's when, all the data really starts to come in and things start to happen and we have, much more meaningful conversations about the information that we're discovering. And I think it's gonna be pretty interesting. And I just can't wait to hear what the high schoolers have to say about what they want to see. That is a really intriguing component of this to me. I'm not hanging my hat on it, but I know it's an important part, and I think we've missed that for a lot of years, and I think it's good that we're thinking that way. And that's the update.
Mr. Bandersky.
Again, on the March 7th in the Grand Blanc News Viewpoint, there was a letter that a city resident wrote in. And it's great because it talks about the very thing we're talking about, planning in the community. This prompted by the selling of the Kmart property. But I'm just passing it along. You'll find it interesting to read because she talks about restaurants and walking in the city and those kinds of things that we've talked about. So, thank you.
No, I haven't read that.
Thank you. I guess the next.
Excuse me, was that a short one?
Nope, you're good. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is committee reports. Mr. Mansur, anything to report from Township Board?
So just a couple of things. The common kind of request or the kind of items of interest when anytime a master plan comes up in the public and we talk to them, no matter who, is always about encouraging retail and encouraging restaurants. So as we go forward with the master plan, I'm certainly going to be looking for ways that we can, not to be, completely specific, but if there's ways that, we can make it easier for a Target or a Trader Joe's or something like that to come in. I'd certainly be interested in making sure that that's an easy route to get in. Second, we are getting some significant interest in the Tech Village concept and area. So I just wanted to make the Planning Commission aware of that. Nothing is obviously firm yet, but we do have some people seriously looking. So that's
Excellent.
that's a good sign. And then finally, we've been talking a lot about the Dort Highway extension, and you'll see that there's some land clearing that started
I was just
on
going to mention that. I was on the trails over there and noticed that.
So I think it's, I guess going to begin in earnest, probably early summer or whatever, but at least something's moving there. So we should see that start to rock and roll here pretty soon. That's it. Thank you.
You have anything else? I'm sorry, Mr. Yancho?
Is the completion date still scheduled for this fall?
I am not. I haven't followed it that closely.
That seems pretty optimistic.
I would seem to be pretty optimistic.
Yeah.
There has been, in the past several years, our township has, and the road commission has directed people to a website at the Genesee County Road Commission.com site, but there's nothing there anymore. It's unavailable. So
Well, hopefully they're taking the money and investing it in the roads and not in the web, not in the internet highway, the real highways.
thank you.
Yeah, right.
Mr. Lloyd, did you have anything else for planning and zoning?
Nothing additional, thank you.
Brown?
Mr. Chairman, the zoning board of appeals meeting in March was canceled, so we had nothing to report. Although totally unrelated, I was really excited to hear the fact that the road commission is actually going to do something with Hill Road.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that made my day to hear that. That is just a disgrace, how bad that road condition is in.
Just a little bit, I guess that would be east of Fenton Road, kind of out in front of the Taco Bell. I hit a pothole there that jarred my teeth.
It's terrible. I drive by there
Unbelievable.
almost every day.
I stay out of that
It's really
lane.
bad.
The right-hand lane is a bad one. So if you don't want your rims dented up on your vehicle, stay on the right-hand lane until it gets fixed.
Yeah.
All right, from a site plan review standpoint, of course, you saw 2 tonight. There was a third one that we saw.
Get that up real fast if you like.
A new office building is proposed on Hill Road.
Hill Road, right across from.
Good-looking building, good site plan. We gave them preliminary site plan approval with some things for them to look at. The lighting needs to be a little bit more uniform than what they had proposed.
If you're familiar with the Bella Vita facility on Hill Road, same developer, same owner, almost exact same design, a lot of nice architectural enhancement with stone. They're using a hardy plank instead of a vinyl in the areas where that's visible, but there's a lot of stone, there's columns, pylons. It's really extensively landscaped. They've done a very nice job. And it's just, as you leave here, it'd just be one of the first things around the corner on Hill Road. It'd be nice.
Talk about anticipated tenants.
Pardon me?
You talk about anticipated tenants. I think we know at least who one of the tenants is going to be.
Well, he's going to be one of them, I believe. And then I don't remember the other.
I just mentioned me. But he doesn't know yet. No commitments. But that's what I wanted to bring up. That I guess it's the operator owner of Bella Vita.
Right.
Plans to have his office in this building, and he seems to be pretty particular in how things turn out.
Great.
Got some nice details on there.
And they're tearing down 2 old houses and a vacant lot, so that'll certainly spruce up the area.
So this is on the south side of Hill Road between Porter and Dort Highway.
Silverton Road dead ends into what the site will be. So.
Right, that's the north.
Straight across from Silverton, that's right. So if you're coming out, you'd be heading south on Silverton, you'll be looking straight at the site across Hill Road. If you look at this map, if it's reasonable enough for you to see, let me try to pull that down just a little for you. You can see Silverton is well, you can't see my finger move, I'm sorry. But you can see that Silverton is right across the street.
Okay.
And on this map, you can see it's pretty close to Dort, and there's Porter over here. There's only a small couple of lots between that and Porter. It's going to be nice.
I think
That's not the old workout facility.
No.
No? How big is that site?
Huh?
How big is that site?
The site, we have 3 acres, I believe, and the building is 10,500 square feet.
It's 3+ I think, acres, if I remember right.
It is about, probably about 400 yards, 400 yards east of where the old workout site used to be.
I did ask the developer, occupancy, and he says Christmas.
Wow, good for him. Awesome.
I said, in spite of Hill Road, and he said, yep.
Nice.
All right, I think it's that time of night that we would entertain a motion for adjournment.
Mr. Chairman, make a motion that we adjourn at
Yep.
8:45.
Motion by Mr. Bandersky and support by Mr. Brown. All those in favor signal by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? We are adjourned. Mr. Bandersky sent at 8:45.
Thank you.
Did you ever hear of this